Okay, so the recording is on. You should be able to see that it's recording on your side. Yes. Okay. Okay. I'm just organizing my screen here. Uh, Angela, you see that the recording is happening? Yes. Angela says yes. Okay, just making sure. Okay, so I will sign the land acknowledgement. It's really important that we include this and as a recognition that the Indigenous people have been taking care of this land for so long. The land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it is now home to many diverse First Nations, also Métis and Inuit peoples. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So we just want to encourage all of you to acknowledge the land that you are situated on now. So now I will pass it over to Angela. Hello, everyone. My name is Angela, and that's my sign name. And I am the manager for General Support Services, or GSS. So I'm here to introduce Mark Faria. Um, he is an expert in financial planning and financial consultation with Monarch Wealth Corporation. He has over 18 years of experience working in this industries, and he focuses on mutual funds as well as life and health insurance and retirement planning services. His goal is to assist all individuals and their families to build their wealth and save it for the future. Um, so he definitely always takes time to work with hard of hearing clients as well as people who are deaf, and he really has a heart for serving this community. He's very passionate about supporting clients with their financial decisions. And I'm sorry, I know that he has also many years of experience presenting to the deaf community as well as individuals who are hard of hearing, and he knows ASL. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and you can click on which interpreter you need if you are participating in this webinar and need interpretation.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Okay, sorry, one second here. Let me just get to the next slide. Okay, so like Angela said, my name is Mark, and yeah, I have a passion for educating not only the deaf and hard of hearing community, but the greater community about anything financial planning related. But for today's webinar, obviously, it's about RSPs and RDSPs and how they compare with each other. So I'll be going through that today. Um, so a little bit about Monarch Wealth, which is the company that I work with. I'm not an employee for them. I work with them. I'm an independent financial planner. But this is just a little bit about Monarch Wealth, who I've been working with for the past almost 8 years. So Monarch Wealth is a Canadian company, and we provide clients with access to a wide range of investment products and opportunities. Monarch Wealth has been around for 40 years. And they provide services that you can see on the screen here. So financial planning, investment portfolios, tax strategies, retirement planning, education savings, GICs, insurance, and of course, RDSPs and RSPs. Okay. So I created this table here to just give a general overview of the differences between RSPs on the left and RDSPs on the right. I'm going to keep it as general and as simple as possible because things can get complex very quickly. depending on everybody's unique situation. So this is just a general overview. So I'll start on the left with what is an RSP, and then I'll hop over to what is an RDSP, and then after this slide, I'll go more into detail about the RDSP, which is a bit more complex, and I think is more important for people to know about during this webinar. So, what is a registered retirement savings plan, otherwise known as an RRSP? So, the purpose of an RSP is to save for retirement on a tax deferred basis. So, what that means is it's not tax free because eventually, when you take money out of it when you're retired, you do have to pay tax. But it's to provide income in retirement. It can also be used to fund a home purchase through something called the Home Buyers Plan or the HBP, or you can pay for your education through something called the Lifelong Learning Plan or the LLP. Both the HBP and the LLP have specific limits and repayment rules. So contributions to an RSP are tax deductible. So it does reduce your taxable income for the year that you make the contribution when you make that contribution. In terms of government incentives, unlike the RDSP, the RSP does not provide any grants or bonds or anything like that. There's no government contributions to the account. However, if you have an employer through your work, sometimes they may offer a matching program where you put money into the RSP through a group plan through your work, and they will match it up to a certain amount. So that's an additional benefit. In terms of withdrawals for the RSP, all withdrawals from the RSP, including your contributions that you put in and your investment growth, are taxed as income at your marginal tax rate, which is your top tax rate. And with an RSP, you must convert your RSP to something called a RIF, RRIF, which is a registered retirement income fund. And that must happen by the end of the year that you turn 71 years old. So when you make that conversion from an RSP to a RIF at 71, you can do it before that, but you must do it at 71. And then the year after 71, so the year that you turn 72, you must take a minimum amount from your new RIF um, as retirement income. Now, the important thing to note that is that RSP withdrawals and eventually RIF withdrawals, RRIF, can affect government benefits that are based on income. So things like ODSP, GIS, OAS, as your income goes up, as you withdraw more money from your RSP or RIF, it can affect those government benefits. So who is eligible to open up an RSP? So you must be a Canadian resident with a social insurance number, and you must have earned income and file a tax return in Canada. And you must open and contribute to the RSP no later than, pardon me, December 31st of the year that you turn 71. So a bit more info about the RSP here. Contribution room is 18% of your annual earned income. Sorry, I'm sick this morning, so you'll see me drink water more frequently than usual. So contribution room for an RSP is 18% of your annual earned income up to a maximum limit, which is for 2025, $32,490. And RSP room can be carried forward also for future use. So if as you're working, you're accumulating that RSP room, you don't have to use it every year. You can actually carry it forward. Again, I apologize. I'm just getting over the flu. So if I just gonna take 30 seconds to grab a bit more water. I just drank a lot, so I'll be right back. I'm very sorry. Very, very sorry. Okay, I really apologize for that. I caught the flu over Thanksgiving, and the more I use my voice, the more I lose it. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so that's for the RSP. Now with the RDSP, it's quite different. It's not very similar to the RSP, other than the fact that it's also going to be used to save for your retirement. The rules are very, very, very different. So with the RDSP, again, the purpose is to provide income in retirement, but it's specifically to provide long-term financial security for a person who has a severe and prolonged disability, which is the government's definition of it. Now, contributions to an RDSP are not tax deductible like an RRSP, so they do not reduce your income. Now, unlike the RSP, though, there are government incentives. So there's something called the CDSG, which is the Canada Disability Savings Grant. So that is a matching program, which means if you put money into the account in the RDSP, the government will match your contribution up to a certain limit. The other program or the government incentive that there is for the RDSP is the CDSB, or the Canada Disability Savings Bond. And that's completely based on income. So you don't have to put money into the account, but if your income is under a certain limit, you'll receive that bond. So both the CDSG and the CDSB are only available if you are 49 years old or younger. Withdrawals from an RDSP are different from an RSP. So when you do withdrawal from an RSP, all of it is taxed. However, with an RDSP, there's different components to it. There's the money that you put in, there's the government grants and bonds, and then there's the investment growth in the account. So eventually, when you do a withdrawal from the RDSP, it's going to withdraw from all parts of that of the account, which is going to be your contributions, grants and bonds, and investment income. The portion of the withdrawal that is made up of your own contributions is not taxable. The other two portions, which is the grants, bonds, and the investment growth, that portion is going to be taxable. With an RDSP, withdrawals must start in the year that you turn 60, and there's a specific government formula to that, and I'll show it to you guys later. Withdrawals prior to 60 can happen, but it can trigger a repayment of grants and bonds. And again, I'll get into that later as well too with the rules. Withdrawals do not affect government benefits. Now, I just want to clarify this here because I put GST, ODSP, GIS, and OAS because I know we have some people in the audience that are in Quebec. So I just want to clarify. I should say that withdrawals generally do not affect government benefits. So they will not affect federal government benefits. But places like Quebec, there are certain limits for RDSP's withdrawals per month. And when you go over that limit, it can affect some of the Quebec provincial benefits. So that's just to clarify that. Eligibility for an RDSP, you must be a Canadian resident with a social insurance number. The beneficiary must be approved for the disability tax credit, and you must be younger than 59 years old or turning 59 years old in the calendar year. So that's just the general overview of the RSP versus the RDSP. There's spousal RSPs. There's different ways you can use RSPs for tax planning, but I'm not going to get into that. I just wanted to provide a general overview of the differences. And then I'm going to get into the RDSP now because, again, I think that's very important for deaf and hard of hearing people to know about. It's a very powerful savings plan that you can open up, hopefully, if you have the disability tax credit and you're under 59. But it's a bit more complex, so I just want to get into that now with the remainder of the presentation. Okay. So you'll see on these slides, it's going to say Mackenzie Investments. Mackenzie Investments is a company that I open my clients' RDSPs with. They're a Canadian investment company, and the vast majority of my clients, like I said, I open their RDSP accounts through Mackenzie. So that's why the presentation here is today from Mackenzie, and they've provided me with this presentation to share with you guys today. And this is just a disclaimer. So the content of this presentation, it's not to be construed as investment advice. I'm not going to be talking about specific investments or anything like that. Um, I'm not offering to sell anything to anybody. This is just for educational purposes. And there's no legal or tax advice in here as well. If anybody has any questions, they can always contact me later, based on your own personal circumstances. Okay, so the RDSP is a registered investment plan, and it was started in 2008 by the federal government. And like I said before, there's government matching. Um, Now, one important thing to know with an RDSP plan is it is the only type of account where you can only have one account. So, for example, you can have five RSPs, you can have five TFSA accounts, but with an RDSP, you can only have one. So that's just important to know. So again, this is just touching on the criteria or the requirements to open up an RDSP. So you must be a recipient of the disability tax credit, like I said. The form is T2201, which is the application form. And like I said before, the account can be opened up until December 31st of the year that you turn 59. You must be a Canadian resident and have a valid social insurance number, like I said before. So if you don't have the disability tax credit, why would you apply for it? It helps because it reduces your income. It's a non-refundable tax credit. It opens the door. It's really the key that opens the door to this RDSP account. And then it also provides other benefits as well too. It opens the door to other benefits like the new Canada Disability Benefit, the Child Disability Benefit. So it's really an important thing to apply for if you're eligible and you haven't applied for it yet. It can also be transferred from a dependent as well. So if you have a dependent where they don't have no income and they're depending on you, you can transfer that credit over to your taxes to reduce your income. And with the disability tax credit, CRA will backdate your tax returns up to a maximum of 10 years back or to the date of disability. So, I mean, if you were, for example, if you're born deaf 30 years ago, the furthest back they will go to backdate your tax returns with the tax credit is 10 years. Okay, qualifiers for the disability tax credit. So how do you qualify for the disability tax credit? This slide is more for people that are not deaf or hard of hearing, because if you're deaf or hard of hearing, it's not really a question of, will you qualify for the disability tax credit? You should be qualifying for the disability tax credit. But generally, this is the definition from the government. It's an impairment in physical or mental functions lasting or expected to last at least 12 months. So specifically, here are some examples. Obviously, deafness and hard of hearing, blindness if you're receiving life-sustaining therapy, if you're restricted in one or more activity of daily living, and stuff like that. So speaking, feeding, dressing, walking, mental functions. This is also important to know as well too. Like I know the entire audience here is deaf and hard of hearing, but I do have clients that are deaf and have hearing children that they may have ADHD or autism, and those hearing children can qualify for the disability tax credit as well too, and open up their own RDSP. So it's just important to know this as well too, for those situations. So when you open up an RDSP, there's an account holder who is the person managing the account, and then there's the beneficiary or the person with the disability and who's basically entitled to the money. So the beneficiary, if they're an adult, so 18 years or older, they must have legal capacity to be the account holder, which means they have to be able to understand the forms that they're signing and enter into a contract to open the account. If there's a situation, like I said before, if you have a child who is unable to, enter into a contract, or you're a parent of a minor child, you are authorized to act as the account holder as well too. Um, and until 2026, so next year, parents, spouses, common law partners, or siblings can open RDSPs on behalf of a beneficiary without court authorization. So that's actually something they've been renewing every few years. It's so they keep renewing it. So in 2026 next year, hopefully they keep renewing that again and again and again. In a situation where a beneficiary is a minor or under 18, then the account holder may be the legal parent or a guardian or public department or agency. So funding the RDSP, how do you get money into an RDSP? Again, the contributions are non-deductible, so they don't reduce your income, and they can be made by anyone. So if you have an RDSP account and let's say your spouse wants to contribute to your RDSP for you, they're allowed to do that. However, as you being the plan holder, if it's your RDSP, you must authorize that person to make the deposit into your account. There's no annual limit to contribute to an RDSP, but all contributions must be made before the age of 60. And there's a maximum lifetime limit of $200,000. So you cannot contribute any more than $200,000 to an RDSP. Okay, so I mentioned the CDSG before, which is the grant program. So this is just explaining that a little bit further. So this is eligible until December 31st that a beneficiary is 49 years old. So at the end of the year, if you're 49, you can be eligible to receive the CDSG. That's the last year that you can receive it. The maximum amount of CDSG grant money that you can receive over your lifetime is $70,000. And this table just shows the breakdown because it is based on family net income. So let's say you're single, it's going to be based on your income alone. If you're married or you're common law, then it's based on you and your partner's income, so your family net income. And if, let's say it's a minor child, then it would be based on their parents' income. So for 2025, if your income is up to $114,750, the first $500 that you deposit into an RDSP will receive 300% matching. The next $1,000 you put into the RDSP will receive 200% matching. So that means that if you put in $1,500, you'll receive $3,500 in grants from the government. Now, if your family net income is over $114,750 for 2025, then unfortunately it's a little bit less. It's 100% matching on the first $1,000. So you put in $1,000 and the government will match $1,000. And these rates change every year. So these net income limits will go up every year. So next year this will be a little bit higher. Okay, so the next is the CDSB, which I mentioned before, which is the Canada Disability Savings Bond. So there's no contributions required to receive CDSBs. And just like the previous one, the CDSG, it's also eligible until December 31st at age 49. So if you're older than 49 years old, you're not going to be eligible to receive the bond either. You have to be 49 by the end of the year. Sorry, you have to receive all bonds by the end of the year you turn 49. After that, you are no longer eligible. The maximum lifetime you can receive for CDSB is $20,000. And this table on the bottom here shows you what your family net income needs to be in order to receive the maximum bond, a partial bond, or if your income goes over a certain amount, which is 57,375 for this year, then unfortunately you don't receive any bond. But if your income is under 37,487, family net income, you'll receive $1,000 every year in February. And then again, if your income is between those two amounts, 37,487 and 57,375 family income, then it's reduced on a prorated basis. Okay. So this is just a table here showing on how you can catch up on 10 years worth of grants. So essentially, just like the disability tax credit that I mentioned before, the government will look back a maximum of 10 years. And if you're eligible for grants within those 10 years and you make a contribution, you can catch up on those grants. But they won't go back more than 10 years. They won't allow you to go back more than 10 years to catch up. So I know it's very difficult to make thousands of dollars of contributions every year into an RDSP, but this is just an example where if you're able to catch up, you can receive a lot of money in a short period of time from the government. So in this example, if you opened up an RDSP this year and you put in $3,500, you would receive a total of $10,500 in grants. Next year, if you did another $4,000, you'd receive $10,500 in grants again. And 2027 and 2028, if you did $5,000 contributions in both of those years, you'd also receive $10,500 for both years. And then in 2029, in this example, if you did a $4,000 contribution as your final catch-up year, you'd receive $8,500. So in this example, your total contributions would be $21,500 from 2025 to 2029, but you'd receive $50,500 from the government in grants just by catching up. I also I also want to note that you'll see that the total grants received every year is $10,500. So normally, if you don't have carry forward grants, the annual limit that you'll receive is $3,500 in grants, which I mentioned in my previous slide. But if you have carry forward grants, then the maximum that you can receive in 1 year is 10,500. And this slide actually just explains that here, so a little bit further. So for grant and bond carry forwards, RDSP beneficiaries eligible for the disability tax credit can access previously unclaimed or carry forward grant and bond for up to the previous 10 years. So, which means, let's say you're 30 years old and you're born deaf, and you open up an RDSP for the first time. That first year that you open up the RDSP, if your income is under that bond limit for the full $1,000 a year, when you open up the RDSP, after a couple months, you can receive $11,000 as a carry forward lump sum payment from the government for bonds. And then again, if you did contributions, you could receive up to 10,500 if you have carry forward grants. So grants are always paid in descending order, which means when the government looks back 10 years, they look back at the highest matching rate, which, like I said before, there's 300% and 200% matching rates. So they look back at the highest matching rate, which would be 300%, and they would go back and look at the oldest years first when they're paying you grants to carry forward. Okay. So withdrawing from an RDSP. So how do you get money out of an RDSP? There's two different ways. There's something called the Lifetime Disability Assistance Payment, or LDAP, and then there's a Disability Assistance Payment, or a DAP. So like I said before, when you do a withdrawal out of an RDSP, it's going to consist of a portion of your contributions that you did, investment income, and the grants and the bonds, which is the CDSG and CDSB. There's also no restriction on the use of the withdrawal from the RDSP, so you don't have to use it for a certain purpose. You can use it for anything when you do the withdrawal. Now, this is the calculation for the Lifetime Disability Assistance Payment, or the LDAP. So annual payments can begin at any age, um, but no later than the end of the 60th year. So when you turn 60 in that specific year, you must start taking LDAP payments. And this is the calculation that the government uses to determine how much you'll receive every year in terms of LDAP. So the calculation is basically the value of your RDSP, which is A, divided by 80, which is the government uses that as a life expectancy age, plus 3 minus, in this example, 60, but it's the age of the beneficiary at the beginning of the calendar year. So in this example, if you had $400,000 built up in your RDSP at the age of 60, that would give you a annual payment of $17,391. And that can be paid annually or it can be paid monthly. You can choose how you want to get paid from the RDSP in the form of an LDAP. Now, the next is the Disability Assistance Payment, or the DAP. So, sorry here. Maybe one of the slides got skipped. Anyway, but essentially what the Disability Assistance Payment is, or the DAP, is it's a little bit different from the LDAP, but it's a one-time payment from the RDSP. So with the LDAP, when you start taking those withdrawals, it's going to pay you a consistent annual or monthly payment from the RDSP. Whereas with this DAP, it's going to be a one-time request or withdrawal from the account. So it's one time versus ongoing with the DAP versus the LDAP. Pardon me. So there's something called the AHA, or the AHA. And what that is it's an assistant holdback amount in the RDSP. So what that means is government money that is received in the account has a 10-year holding period. So if the government pays money into the RDSP account, this account is meant for retirement. So the way that the government has structured this account is if you do a withdrawal from the account and the government had paid any money into the account, whether it's grants or bonds, within the past 10 years of a withdrawal, you have to repay a portion of those grants that you received. So essentially, every dollar that you withdraw prior to the age of 60, you'd be paying back the government $3. So it's 3 for 1 that you'd have to pay to them up to a maximum amount. So that's why I tell people when you put money into an RDSP, you really have to treat it like a pension plan or a retirement plan, because if you start taking out money early before the age of 60 and you're receiving grants and bonds, then you end up paying the government back a lot of the money that they gave you in the first place, which is the grants and the bonds. So it's 3 for 1. So taxation of withdrawals. I've mentioned this a couple times already. Um, all withdrawals from an RDSP are made up of your contributions that you made, the investment income, and the CDSG and the CDSB. Um, there's also tax deferred rollovers. So there's situations where you can roll over money from other investment plans, but that's more specific than this presentation, essentially. So with RDSPs, there's minimum and maximum amounts that you can make from the account. So starting in 2014, the government actually increased the withdrawal limit um, on withdrawals for something called PGAPs, PGAPs, which means primary government assisted plans. So what is a PGAP? A PGAP is essentially if the government put more money into the RDSP than you did, it's considered a primary government assisted plan. And for those types of plans, which is the majority of plans, the annual withdrawal limit is the LDAP formula that I explained earlier, and 10% of the FMV, which is the fair market value or the value of your account at the beginning of the year. So I mentioned before that you can only have one RDSP account at a time. However, if you open up an RDSP with one financial institution, you are able to transfer it to another institution. So when that transfer takes place, all of the history of the account transfers over to the new account, and it could be with a completely different company. And then when you open up the new account, that account is pending until the first one that you opened is closed and the money transfers over. Um, Another type of transfer is a rollover of RSP, RIF, or RPP, which is a pension plan. So if you have a parent or a grandparent that passes away and you're financially dependent on them and you're a beneficiary of an RDSP, in certain circumstances, you can roll over those those accounts to your RDSP. But they are taxable when you eventually withdraw it. If you have an RESP, um, and for example, let's say a beneficiary of an RESP also has an RDSP, and they don't go to school and they have some income left in the RESP, that can also be rolled over to the RDSP as well too. And also inheritance and gifts from others. So those withdrawals are tax free. So I just mentioned this as well too. So RESP, if you have income in an RESP, this is a bit more specific than this presentation is going to get into. But again, if you have income in an RESP plan and let's say a child is no longer going to school, we can roll that over to an RDSP if eligible. So this is a case study. It's not going to apply to a lot of people, but this is just a case study where in Ontario, in this example, based on the tax rates, let's say that an elderly parent had $500,000 in their RIF account, and they had a child that was financially dependent on them that had an RDSP. You can actually roll over, like I said before, money from a financially dependent to a financially dependent child if they have an RDSP, tax free over to that child. And this is just a way or an example that taxes can be saved from a parent to a financially dependent child to basically limit or avoid taxes. So I mentioned this before as well too, the impact on social assistance benefits from an RDSP. So payments from an RDSP do not impact other income tested federal government programs, so which is including OAS, Old Age Security, GIS, Guaranteed Income Supplement, GST, or social assistance benefits. So like Ontario Works or ODSP. So what happens? A lot of people ask me this question, if they open up an RDSP, what happens if they pass away? So if you have an RDSP account and you pass away, the RDSP needs to be collapsed, so it needs to be closed. So in that situation, all the grants and bonds, the CDSGs and the CDSBs received in the last 10 years prior to the date of death need to be repaid to the government. And the net proceeds of the account, after that money goes back to the government, is paid to the estate of the beneficiary. And this is important where you should have a will as well too, because that will determine or instruct who receives the money from your estate after you pass away with an RDSP. Because if you don't have a will, then it becomes determined by provincial rules essentially. So it may not be exactly the way you want the money to be distributed. So it's important to have a will as well too when you have an RDSP. And when you pass away from an RDSP again, the taxes on the grants and the income in the plan are included in your in the beneficiary's estate. So what happens if you're no longer disability tax credit eligible? Because that opens the door to the RDSP. So if you're no longer eligible, what happens? So for example, like I have some clients that have hearing children that have ADHD, and the government might only qualify those children for 5 years for the disability tax credit, and then they have to reapply. So if those children have an RDSP and their disability tax credit expires, the account essentially becomes frozen, so you can no longer receive grants or bonds in the account, and withdrawals can be done, but essentially you'd have to reapply for the disability tax credit and get approved in order for it to be unfrozen, in order to receive grants and bonds again into the future. So specifically for Quebec, I mentioned before that there can be an impact on social benefits in Quebec with RDSP withdrawals. So when you receive RDSP payments and you're receiving payments from Quebec social assistance or solidarity programs, they're generally exempted. RDSP withdrawals are generally exempted and from seeing an impact, but the following situations need to be considered. So the market value of the RDSP does not impact payments from Quebec's social benefit programs. However, the LDAP, which is the ongoing payment received from a RDSP, received by adult beneficiaries, will not impact social benefit payments up to a monthly amount of $950. So there is a limit if you live in Quebec and you're receiving social assistance or solidarity program payments. DAP payments, so the one-time withdrawals from an RDSP, only impact the liquid asset component, which could, if the limit is exceeded, impact social benefit payments. So this is just important to know if you live in Quebec and you are receiving those social benefit program payments in Quebec. So things to keep in mind when you're applying for an RDSP. Um, the grant and bond allocation. So essentially, clients that open up an RDSP account with me, there's an RDSP application. There's going to be a grant and bond application as well too, and then we can choose how you want your money to be invested and how you want your grant and bond to be invested. And also, it's important to know that for minor children, let's say there's a minor child under the age of 18 that's deaf, and you're opening up an account for them so they can have an RDSP. The primary caregiver would have to sign off on the application as well too, because the grants and bonds will be based on that primary caregiver's income on behalf of the beneficiary when you're opening it up for them. So this is just a summary of the benefits again of the RDSP. So no impact on federal and most provincial social benefits. Tax sheltered growth, which means the investments that you have in the RDSP throughout the years that's growing, you're not going to be taxed on it every year. It's only when you withdraw from the RDSP that you're taxed. There's multiple investment options for RDSPs. And again, you can carry forward 10 years worth of those grant and bond entitlements with the RDSP to catch up. And that's essentially the presentation. So I guess we'll enter the Q&A portion and I'll answer any questions that you guys have.
If we could also do a stop share on the
Sure.
PowerPoint.
1 second here.